So you've made a lot of money on a stock. What do you do next? So I got an interesting question from a follower the other day. And since this situation comes up fairly frequently, we thought we'd do a whole video on the answer. So the question is this. I've worked for Amazon for over 10 years and have built up $500,000 in company stock with roughly a 2 times gain for tax purposes. This is the majority of my net worth outside of my house and my 401k. I know I should diversify, but how can I do so in a tax efficient manner? So, great question. Again, something we get a lot. Before we get started, let me just say I'm going to give some general thoughts about how to approach this situation. Most of the ideas will apply whether it's the company you work for, like the reader question that we got, or it's just a stock that you've held for a long time and it's grown too large within your portfolio. But bear in mind, this isn't specific advice for any one person. Every situation is indeed a little different. So that being said, here's some things to consider if you're in this situation where one stock has become an outsized part of your portfolio. First, always, taxes should not be a primary consideration when making portfolio decisions. So one of my Facet colleagues likes to say, taxes won't ruin a financial plan, but risk can. So what you want to do is figure out how to get your portfolio to an acceptable level of risk first, then worry about the tax consequences. Now, one reason why I say this is because if you hold a concentrated stock position, the problem never gets better by waiting. That's because only 2 things can possibly happen. Either the stock goes up, which is great, but makes your portfolio concentration problem worse, as well as makes the tax consequences of making any changes more expensive. That doesn't solve the problem. The other thing that could happen is the stock goes down, which, if that happens, you'll wish you have already sold the stock. So unless you're literally never going to sell the stock, you will eventually pay taxes on your gains. It's a question of whether you're going to pay tax now or whether you're going to pay it later. Now, a lot of times when I have these conversations with Facet members, they're really asking my opinion about the stock's price today. So in this case, is Amazon stock cheap? Is it expensive? What about, some new product launch or earnings next week or what have you? I would encourage you to not focus on stock-specific issues when making this decision. For one, timing short-term stock movements in general is extremely difficult, but more to the point, this decision is really about risk management, not about picking the perfect moment to sell. There's always going to be reasons why the stock might keep going up. There's never going to be some obvious sign that now is the perfect moment to sell. Now, speaking of risk management, when we're talking about a big, highly successful company like an Amazon, sometimes people underestimate the risk of continuing to hold the stock. They'll say something like, hey, Amazon's a great company, or Amazon's not going away. Look, I totally understand that, and I would agree. Amazon's not going suddenly out of business. But consider this, all right? Over the last 10 years, Amazon's stock price has dropped by at least 20% 5 separate times, and fell by more than 50% as recently as 2022. So great companies, even like an Amazon, experience this kind of volatility. Now, what would happen if that 50% downturn happened right around the time you were getting ready to retire, or right around the time you were going to spend this money on college or what have you? Something like that could totally ruin your financial picture. Now, if you throw this question into Google, you might find some suggestions out there that are that you could hedge this big position, probably using some kind of option strategy. Now, in theory, this could save you on taxes, because if you can hedge the position and not sell it, then you're never going to pay tax on it. The trouble is that this doesn't actually solve the problem. All right, so if you try to hedge the downside of a stock, by necessity, you're giving up the upside. Most people still need the value of their stock to keep rising in order to realize their financial goals. The viewer who sent in this question said it was worth about $500,000, which is a lot of money, but it's not enough money to live off of. He still needs that stock to appreciate in value. But more importantly, in order to actually use the stock's value to pay for things, whether you're in retirement or whether it's college or a house or whatnot, you still eventually need to sell it. So you need to remove the hedge, you need to sell the stock, and at that point, you're paying the tax. So we get back to what we said earlier. You can delay taxes, but you can't avoid them entirely. Now, another strategy you'll see out there is something called covered calls, and this is where you sell options on a stock you own and collect some small amount of income for doing so. Now, the problem with this strategy is that it doesn't really hedge your downside hardly at all, but it does eliminate most of your upside. So once again, you haven't really solved the problem. If the stock plunges, you're still on the hook. And by the way, you'll owe taxes on the income you get from the covered call strategy. So there's a lot of complexity for a really uncertain benefit. All right, so what can you do? Again, every situation's a little different. However, in my opinion, it's usually the case that selling in the sum of the stock is the only logical answer. Now, how much you sell depends a lot on various factors. So maybe how long before you're going to need the money? Do you expect to get more stock from your employer? What about other assets you might have? There's many other factors that could come into play. But here's at least one way to start thinking about how you might determine how much stock to sell. Imagine the stock drops by 50% and never recovers. And before you tell me that, oh, this is Amazon, such a thing can't happen to a great company like Amazon. In the 1990s, Intel was a universally lauded company, considered a great company, revered in the same way as all the tech giants are today. And yet Intel is still more than 50% down from its 2000 peak, more than 25 years ago. So anyway, it can happen even to a company like Amazon. So this is a useful exercise. So you start saying, well, let's say the stock drops by 50%, never recovers. Let's see what your financial plan looks like in that scenario. Maybe compare that scenario to one where you sell, I don't know, say half the stock, pay the tax out of the proceeds from the sale, and then invest the rest in the general market. Maybe you assume the general market grows, I don't know, 7, 8%. You pick a number that you think is appropriate. From there, you can play around with different amounts of stock sales until you get to something where you're comfortable with the downside risk. And remember, too, that you don't have to sell it all at once. You can spread your sales out over 2-3 years to help ease that tax burden. Now, like I said, any actual advice would be based on your particular personal situation. But in my experience, this is a good framework to get you started. So to bring it all home, if you find yourself in this situation where one stock has really become a huge part of your portfolio because it's appreciated so much, congratulations. Having a stock made you a lot of money, that's a great problem to have. Just don't let yourself get frozen by the tax consequences of diversifying your winnings. There's no magic way to avoid paying taxes at some point, and the longer you wait, the riskier your situation becomes. And hey, what do you think? Have you been in this situation? Do you have other solutions you want to throw out there? Throw a comment in the comment section. I'm happy to respond to anything I see there. If you like this content, or be coming at you with reactions to news, thoughts on the market, more pieces like this on responses we get from subscribers. So hit that subscribe button. You'll be the first to know when we've got a new video coming. I'd love to see you again.